Hello friends, welcome to Coding Course YouTube channel. In this video, I will explain you a TCS IPA Java program. So in this question, first we have to make a class player with below attributes. So here we will make a class player. Inside of this class, we have to make these 5 variables: player ID, then player name, then int runs, string, player type, and string mesh type. After that, we have to make getter, setters, and parameterize constructor in the above mentioned attribute sequence as required. So in most of the question, you don't require setters. We only have to make getters and parameterize constructor. So after this, I will make parameterize constructor. So I will use the class name player, and inside of this, I will make all these variables: int player ID, then string player name, int runs, then string player type, and string mesh type. Now in this parameterized constructor, I will initialize all these variables. So this dot player ID equal to player ID, then this dot player name equal to player name, and runs equal to runs. This dot player type equal to player type, and this dot mesh type equal to mesh type. So all these variables with these keywords are these 5 variables which we have made here, and after the equal to sign we have these variables. After that we have to make getters. So first we have to make getter for player ID. So public static and return type of this getter will be int, because data type of this variable is int. So int get player ID. In this we will return this dot player ID. Next is player name. So public, and the return type of this will be string. So string, then get player name, and here I will write return this dot player name. Next we have to make for runs. So public int get runs, and here I will write return this dot runs. Then next for player type, public string get player type, and here I will write return this dot player type. And last we have for mesh type, public string get mesh type, and here I will write return this dot mesh type. So in the class player, first we have to make these 5 variables, then the parameterize constructor and the getters. Then next we have to make this class solution with the main method. So after this I will make a class solution, public class solution, and in this we have to make our main method, public static void main string arguments. Now in this main method we have to take input. So I will import our scanner class here. So import java.util.star. So I am using here star, so it will import all the Java classes, because later we have to use other classes also. So now in this main method we have to take input, but in the question you will have a sample input. So if you scroll down in this question, you can see that there is sample input. So you are thinking that how to take this input. You can see that we have these 5 variables: player ID, player name, runs, player type, and mesh type. So you can see that this starting 5 inputs are for the first player, then next 5 input are for the second player, next 5 input is for the third player, and next 5 inputs are for the fourth player. So we have to take input for 4 player objects, and this remaining 2 inputs we have to take because later we have to use them in our static methods. So now I will make a object array of size 4, because we have to take input of 4 player objects. Player p equal to new player, and its size is 4. Then I will take a for loop for int I equal to 0 and I less than p dot length and I plus plus. Now in this for loop I will take input of these 5 variables. So first is int player ID equal to sc dot next int. So you can see that we also have to make the object of scanner class. So I will make it here, scanner sc equal to new scanner system dot in. So whenever we are taking input for integer, after that we have to write sc dot next line, so scanner can go in the next row. Then next variable is get player name. So string player name equal to sc dot next line. So for strings we do not have to write this sc dot next line again. Then next variable is runs. So int runs equal to se dot next int. Now after that, because we have taken integer input, again we have to write se dot next line, and next variable is player type. So string player type equal to se dot next line. Then next is match type. So string match type equal to se dot next line. And after that we have to store all these values in an object, and that object we have to store in this object array of players. So I will write here p of I equal to new player. So here it is calling our parameterized constructor, and here we will enter all these variable names in the same sequence that we have entered here these variables. So first is player id, then player name, then runs, then player type and match type. So after that you can see we also have to take input of the remaining two variables, but we don't know the name of these two variables. So we will see in this question, like after making the main method and taking this input, what we have to do next. You can see we have to make two static methods in our solution class. So first method is we have to make a method name find player with lowest runs in the solution class. So in this method it will take array of player objects and string player type. So from that string, first string is string player type. So we have to take this string again in the input. So we will take it after this for loop. So then what is the next remaining input? You can see in the second method we have to take array of player objects and string match type. So this next input is string match type. So I will copy this line from here and I will paste here. So you can see that now we have taken input for the remaining two variables, and then we will close our scanner sc.close. Now we will make these methods. So outside of this main method, but in the solution class, I will make this first method public static. And what is the return type of this method? You can see that this method will take array of player objects and string player type and returns the least runs of the player. It will only return runs of the player. So run is the integer value. So return type of this method is int. So int method name is find player with lowest runs, and in this method we have to take array of player objects, so player p and string player type. Now we have to find the runs which are the lowest only for the matching player type. So I will write the program here. So for finding the lowest score, I will use here priority queue. So priority queue of type integer, because runs is a integer value. Then pq equal to new priority queue. Then I will take a if statement if p not equal to null and end player type dot length is larger than 0. So we have to use this if statement to avoid null pointer exception. Suppose if this array has no objects and we are trying to check any object, then we will get error of null pointer exception. Then I will take a for loop for int I equal to 0 and I less than p dot length and I plus plus. Now in this for loop I will take a if statement if p of I dot get player type, because we have to check the player type dot equals. So we are checking the player type of every object with this input player type. And if you scroll down in the question, they will tell you that all the searches should be case insensitive. So whether they are in lowercase or uppercase, you don't have to worry. You only have to match the two strings. So that's why we have written here dot equals ignore case. After that here I will write if this condition is true. So if we found any player with the same player type, then I will store that player runs in this priority queue. So pq dot add p of I dot get runs. In the last we have to return this runs. So how we will return the runs? So I will use a if statement if pq dot size equal to 0. Suppose if this priority queue is null or it is empty, so that time we have to return 0. And in the else part, suppose we have some values in this priority queue. So you know that feature of the priority queue, that it will store all the values in the ascending order. So the starting element of this priority queue will be the smallest, and we have to find the lowest runs. So to check that, we can use this statement pq dot peak. So it will show the element of the first index from this priority queue, and here we will return this. So return pq dot peak. So this first method is ready. Now we have to make our second method, public static. And what is the return type of this method? You can see that in this method we have to take array of player objects and string match type, and it will return the array of player objects. So return type of this method is array of the player objects, so player and this array symbol, and the method name is find player by match type. In this method we have to take two parameters. First parameter is array of the player objects, so player p, and string match type. So this string we have taken in the input in the last. So you can see that in this method we have to return the array of player objects in descending order of their player id for the player objects which have match type equal to string match type input. So first we have to take out all the objects which is having the same match type of this string match type, and then we have to return that objects in a array in the descending order of their player id. So how we will do it? So again I will use here priority queue. So priority queue of type integer, because we have to sort the array of their player id and it is an integer value. Then pq equal to new priority queue. Then I will take an empty object array here, player p2 equal to null. So right now we do not have to initialize the size of this array, we will do it later. And then I will make a variable here, int size equal to 0. Then I will take a if statement here, if p not equal to null and match type dot length is larger than 0. We have to use this if statement to avoid the null pointer exception. Now here I will take a for loop, for int I equal to 0 and I less than p dot length and I plus plus. So from here what I will do is I will store the player id of the object which is having the same match type as this string match type. So I will use the if statement here, if p of I dot get match type dot equals ignore case match type. So here we are using this string input. Then if this condition is true, then in this priority queue I will add the player id of that object. So p of I dot get player id, and we will also increment this size variable. So it will tell that how many elements we have taken in this priority queue. So we have to initialize the same size of this array. Then after this for loop, now here we will declare size of this p2 array. So p2 equal to new player and its size is size variable. Then here I will take a if statement, if pq dot size is larger than 0. So only then we will execute the remaining program. So then here I will take a for loop, for int I equal to 0 and I less than p2 dot length and I plus plus, and inside of this I will take another for loop. So int j equal to 0 and j less than p dot length and j plus plus. So here I will write if p of j dot get player id equal to pq dot peak. So then here I will write p2 of I equal to p of j and pq dot poll and break. And outside of this for loop I will write if statement here, if pq dot size equal to 0. So then we will break this for loop. So I will explain you all this program later. You can see that we have stored the objects in this p2 array which is having the same match type as this match type string. But you can see that using this priority queue, it will store the objects in this p2 array in the ascending order of their player id, but we have to store them in the descending order. So how we will do it? So first I will use the if statement here. Outside of this first if statement, here I will write if p2 equal to null. So then we will return null. And in the else part, suppose if this p2 array is not null, then we have to return this p2 array. But we also have to make one more method to reverse this object array before returning. So I will make a method here, public static, and the return type of this method will be this objects array player and reverse. It is the method name, and we have to take only one parameter, array of the objects players. I will take two variables, int left equal to 0 and right equal to p dot length -1. Then I will take while left is less than right. Then we have to swap the values from the left to right indexes. So we have to take a temp variable, and what is the data type of the temp variable? So because in this array we only have player objects, so I will use the player data type. So player temp equal to p of left and p of left equal to p of right and p of right equal to temp. And we also have to increment the left pointer and decrement the right pointer. And in the last we have to return this array p. So here I will call this method. So p2 equal to reverse, and here I will enter this array p2. So you can see that we have made our both static methods. So now what we have to do is we only have to print our output. So for the first method, what we have to do is we have to take the necessary input variables and call this method find player with lowest runs. And for this method, the main method should print the returned runs. So you can see that in the first method we are returning the runs. So if this value is not equal to 0, so then we have to print the returned runs as it is, and or in the else part we have to print no such player. So now in this main method I will call this methods here. So for storing the values of the runs, I will make a variable here, int run equal to find player with lowest runs, and in this we have to pass two parameters. First is array p and string player type. So then here I write if statement if run not equal to 0, then we have to print it as it is in the else part. So in the else part what we have to do is we have to print here no such player. So I will write here no such player. Then we have to take the output from the second method, and it will return the array of objects. So here I will make an array of objects. So player p2 equal to find player by match type, and here in this method we have to pass two parameters, array of p and match type input. Then here I will write if statement if p2 not equal to null, then we have to print player id of every object from this array. So because of that I will use a for loop here, for int I equal to 0 and I less than p2 dot length and I plus plus. So in this for loop I will copy this print statement, and here I will write p of I dot get player id, and in the else part so I will copy this statement here, and here I will write no player with given match type. So whenever you are writing the output, check that you have written the all the alphabet in the same case as given in the question. So now that's all we have to do in this question. So here we have to use array p2, and now let's run this program. So I will use here the sample input, and then we will check our output from here. So you can see that for this input here we are getting the right output. Now we will see that how this program is working. I have made a class player here in which we have these 5 variables, and then we have made this parameterized constructor for these 5 variables, and then we have made these 5 getters for getting the values of every object. Then you can see that in this main method we are taking the input, and now I will show you that how we are taking the input from here. You can see this sample diagram here. So you can see that length of this object array is 4. So in this array we have 4 indexes. So what will happen is when value of I is 0, so right now value of I is 0, then we will go in this for loop and it will take the input of the first 5 values from the input. You can see here this input. So first it will take the first 5 values, and then what it will do is it will store all these values in a player object using this parameterized constructor. Then we will store that player object in this player array at index 0. So you can see that this is our first object. Then I will increment, so I will become 1. So when index is 1, it will take the next 5 values and it will store all these values in a player object. Then it will store this player object at first index. Then I will increment. Again it will take the next 5 values and it will store all these values in a player object and then we will store this object in the player array at index 2. Then index will increment, so it will become 3. So when index is 3, it will take the next 5 values and it will again store them in object, and now we will store this object in the player array at this index 3. So now in this player array we have 4 objects. After that it will take the remaining 2 input for player type and mesh type, because later we have to use them in our methods. So now after that you can see that here we are calling our first method, find player with lowest runs, in which we are passing the array of these objects and we are passing this first string player type. So you can see that here we have this first method, find player with lowest runs. So you know that we have to find the lowest runs of player which have player type equal to this string player type. So you can see that here I have taken a priority queue of type integer. So then I am checking that if this array is null or not, and length of this string is larger than 0. So you can see now this array has 4 objects and this string length is also not equal to 0. So then we will go in this for loop. So this for loop will start from index 0. So right now it is at this index 0 here. So when we are at index 0 here, in this if statement we will check the player type of this first object. So you can see that here player type is international, and in this string player type is state. So you can see that it is not equal to this object player type, so this line will not execute. Then I will increment, so then it will check the player type of the next object. Here you can see we also have international, which is not equal to state, so again this line will not execute, and then I will increment, so it will become 2. So when index is 2, you can see that in this object we have player type equal to state. So what it will do is it will store the runs of this object in the priority queue. You can see that run of this object is 78. So you can see that suppose this is our priority queue here. So here I have stored 78, and after that I will increment, so I will become 3. Now it will check in this object if the player type of this object is equal to this player type string. You can see yes, here we also have state and here we also have state. So it will store the runs of this object, so it is 67. Now we have runs of the 2 objects in this priority queue. We know that what will happen is it will store all these runs in the ascending order. So first it will take 67 and then it will take 78. So at first index of priority queue we have 67 and at second index we have 78. So you can see that after that this for loop will break. Then in this if statement it will check the size of this priority queue. You can see that it is not equal to 0 because we have these 2 values in the priority queue. Then we will go in the else part, and here it will check pq.peak. So it will check the first element of the priority queue. So first element is 67. So it will return this first element 67. So you can see that we will get this 67 here. So here we are calling this method. So here we get 67 in this variable, and you can see that value of run is not equal to 0. So because of that it will print 67 in the output. So that's why in the output we have received 67. So which is the output for the first static method. Now we will see the second static method. So second static method is find player by mesh type. So we are passing the array of objects and the mesh type string. We have taken this mesh type string here as input. So from here we have this method find player by mesh type. So you can see that here we also have to do the sorting. So you can see that first I have taken a priority queue of integer because we have to sort the array in the descending order of their player ID. So you can see in this question here we have to sort them in the descending order of their player ID. Then after that I have taken a empty player array because right now we don't know that how many player objects we have to store in this array, and we have taken the size of this array equal to 0. So then in this if statement we will check that if this array is not equal to null and the length of this string is also not equal to 0. So you can see this array is not null because we have 4 objects in this array, and this mesh type string is also not equal to 0. So then this for loop will start. So for int I equal to 0. So now value of I is 0. So when value of I is 0, it will check the match type with the match type input string. You can see that in the first object we have match type equal to 1 day. Yes. So what it will do is it will store this object player ID in the priority queue. So here we have our priority queue. So in this it will store 11. So you can see that after storing the player ID of this object in the priority queue, we are also incrementing this size variable. So now the value of this size variable will become 1. Then I will increment, so I will become 1. You can see that in this object which is at index 1, here match type is equal to test, which is not equal to 1 day. So that's why this lines will not execute. Then I will increment, so it will become 2. So here you can also see that in this object match type is equal to test, which is not equal to match type 1 day. So again this lines will not execute. Next I will increment, so I will become 3. So here you can see that in this object match type is equal to this match type string 1 day and 1 day. Yes, so it will take the player ID of this object and it will store it in this priority queue. So now in this priority queue we also have 14. So we have two values here and size variable will also increment. So now it will become 2 because we have taken two player ID in this priority queue. It means that from these four objects only two objects have match type equal to this input match type string. So we have to return these two objects in the descending order in a object array. After that we will initialize the size of this P2 array. Size of this array is 2. So you can see that, so this is our P2 array and its size is only 2. Then you can see that I have taken a if statement here. If PQ dot size is larger than 0, you can see yes, in this PQ we have two values 11 and 14. So then I have taken these two for loops to store the objects which is having this same player ID as we have in this PQ. So you can see that here I is starting from 0. So here I have taken I for array P2 which we have to return. So here I is starting from 0 and it is for P2 array, and here J is also starting from 0. J is starting from 0 and here J is for array P. So right now in this first array P we have 4 objects, but in this P2 array we do not have any objects. We only have space to store 2 objects. So you can see that now we will go in this if statement. So it will check the player ID of the first object from this object array and it will try to match it with the priority queue first element. So you can see that in the priority queue first element is 11 and in the object array. So here in the first object player ID is also 11. So you can see they are equal 11 and 11. So what will happen is in this P2 array we will store this object. So you can see that I is 0 here. So in P2 array at index 0 we will store the object of array P. Here J is also 0. So it will store the first object. So here we will store this object. So now you can see that we do not require this first element of this priority queue because for this player ID we already have stored the object. So we will remove it from the priority queue. Then we will break this for loop because at first index of the array P2 we can only store one element. This inside for loop will break. Then this I will increment. So now I will become 1. So now we have to store value in this P2 array at next index 1, and from this next for loop again J will start from 0. Now you can see that it will check the first object of this array. You can see in the first object we do not have player ID 14. Then J will increment, so J will become 1. Then it will check in this second object. So you can see that here player ID is 12. So it is not equal to 14. Then this J will increment, it will become 2. Here you can see in this object player ID is 13 and it is not equal to 14. Then J will increment. So now J will become 3. Now you can see that in this object here player ID is 14. So this if condition is true. So then it will store this object of this array P in this array P2 at index 1. So you can see that I is 1. So in the P2 array at index 1 we are storing the object of array P which is at index 3. So then we will remove the value from the priority queue because for this element 14 we also have stored the object. So we do not require this value 14. So then after pq.poll we will break this for loop and here it will check this if statement. If size of the PQ is equal to 0, you can see size of PQ is 0, so we do not have to run this for loop anymore because we have stored the two values in the P2 array. Then this for loop will also break. In the last, it will check this if statement here, if P2 equal to null. So you can see that P2 is not equal to null, so we will go in this else statement, and here what will happen is now we have to reverse this P2 array. You can see at index 0 in this P2 array we have this object with player ID 11, and at the next index we have object with player ID 14. So you can see that it is in the ascending order of their player ID, but we have to return them in the descending order. So it means that we have to reverse this array. So that's why I have written this program here. So you can see that before returning this P2 array, we will call this reverse method, and we are passing this array P2 here. So here in the left variable we have 0, and in the right variable we have, so length of this P2 is 2, so 2 minus 1 is 1. So in the left variable we have 0, and in the right variable we have 1. So you can see that this is our P2 array before reversing. So now you can see that this is our P2 array after reversing. So then you can see that left will increment, it will become 1, and right will become 0. Then this value will break. So then it will return this reversed array in which we have 14 in the starting and 11 at index 1. So then we will return this P2 array in the main method. So you can see that in the main method what we have to do is we have to store this reverse array in this P2 array here, and then we have to print the player ID of these objects. So you can see that at index 0 we have this object with player ID 14. So first it will print 14, and then it will print 11. So you can see that in the output, that's why first we will get 14 and then 11. So you can see that this is how these two methods are working in this program. Thanks for watching.